Hello people, in the previous video we discussed about what the books tell to the historian. Now let us talk about the burials also. The NCERT book says the silent centennials, that's the story of the megaliths. Now let's understand what the meaning of the word megalith is, where the mega means big and lithos means stone. So literally it means the big stones. Actually, in the excavations that we have found, that the historians have found, that these are kind of burial sites where they have found several kind of big stones kind of structure. For example, this particular area, it's a Stonehenge in the Wiltshire, England, or similarly we have this kind of a structure. Here again we have massive stone kind of things. It is a site which has been found in Navel Tirtha. It's a burial site in Karnataka, India. Another megalith site that we have found in Pakistan is the megalith of Asota, or it is actually in the Sheva village of Pakistan. Similarly, here we have Hirbankal in Karnataka, India. Again, it's a very big megalithic site. And then we have this Iron Age burial site. Here we can see these circular kind of stones being put. It's artificially being put by people, and it's a very old site. Here we see this circular thing. That's actually an Iron Age burial site in Tiruvannamalai, Tamil Nadu. It's actually a district there. And similarly, this is also a burial site. Actually, these burial sites, or this kind of a pot or something, is called as a cist. Cist literally means it's a burial chamber or a coffin that we use in today's world. So let's see what these burial sites are actually. They're carefully arranged by the people to mark the burial sites. And as far as burial sites are concerned, these are the places where the dead people are buried. This practice actually began somewhere around 3000 years ago. This particular practice of megaliths is prevalent into Deccan, the South India, the northeast of the India, and also in Kashmir, that we have found in the Indian region, on the Indian subcontinent. These are the four areas that we have found such practices going on in the previous eras, apart from several other places in the world. For example, as we have just seen, the Stonehenge of the England. Now let's see what are the types of megaliths. We have seen two kinds of megalith in general. The one is the underground type and the other one is the surface type. In the underground type, the dead is buried underground. For example, this is a particular case where we see that the stones are marked upward, and we can generalize that below this surface, below this earth surface, could be the dead buried inside, below or underneath these stones. Again, this particular area that we see here, we see this is a chamber where a particular person, a dead person, might have been buried years ago. So this is the underground side. And otherwise, this is something where we see these are places the dead might have been buried over the surface. For example, this is again a particular site where we see something happening above the surface. Well, these are the burial places in the modern era. That is what we see in today's world. Here it's an Islamic site where people are buried, and here it is a Christian site where the people are buried. Don't you find a similarity in the previous or even in the modern era, that is the contemporary era? The people are buried underground and then laid with a tombstone or something like that, some kind of stuff, which is actually a place where the family members or the relatives or the known of the dead might come to this place again, and they might give tributes to all these dead people. So this is what they believe as per mythology. So these are the stuffs which actually makes the landmark. These stones kind of stuff, here, these are actually the landmarks, and this is the same thing which the previous people or the ancient people might have also done. Now let's see what they must have done to prepare such kind of burial site. They must have gone for breaking the boulders. They might have chosen the boulders, the big boulders. They might have searched for those. Then finding a suitable stone, they must have given them the shape. For example, here we see that here is a particular shape being given. It's kind of a circular sheet, or in other way around, here it's a particular similar kind of stone shapes. We see that all these shapes are similar in nature. or similarly these kind of blocks. Certainly in the nature you won't find these blocks in this particular shape, so the ancient people might have carved it out for their own purposes. Then transporting the stones to the burial site from the mountainous area or from the rocky area where they might have found all these stones, and then digging the pits. They might have digged the pits for the dead, they might have digged the pits, they might have buried the dead there, and then kept the tombstone above it or somewhere, whatever, in whatever style they preferred. They might have done that in their own way. So this was the area that this was the time when we actually saw the megaliths coming up. With the burials, we also found, the historians also found several other things being buried. For example, this red kind of a utensil, this sandy utensil, and this black kind of a utensil, which is actually called black and red ware. It is actually found in the northern India, in the parts of India only, and nowhere else west to the Indus. The historians have never found such kind of pottery ware anywhere else. Well, and apart from those utensils, the historians have also found tools and weapons with the buried people, and at some particular places we have also found weapons or equipments which were related to the horse. We have also found ornaments along with the buried skeletons, and we have also found the skeletons of horses. For example, in this particular photograph here on the left side, we can see that there is an animal and then there is a human being, that these are the skeletons we can easily recognize. Now let's see how to find, or what were the finding about the social differences that we actually saw on these burial sites. Here we see in these two photographs, we can see that two skeletons are here, and one of the skeleton, it seems quite rich. He has several of these ornament things made up of gold or copper or certain kind of stone things that we see here, and there's another photograph which only has some pottery or utensil kind of stuff. So we can easily consider, or we can easily estimate that this man might have been a poor guy at that time, or this man might have been a rich guy in those kind of societies. So we can see that in a society we have rich guys, poor guys, we have chiefs, or we have followers, and accordingly the burial sites were given with such kind of aristocracy and such kind of things. In one of the burial sites at Inamgaon, we have seen a skeleton, a dead man with 33 gold beads, 2 stone beads, 4 copper bangles, and 1 conch shell, that's a shank that we find in the sea. So this kind of respect was given to the burials, and we expect that this was the thing given to a chief or a rich man of that time. Now let's see where some burial spots meant for certain families. That is, was it probable that the burial spots meant for only one family or one clan of a village? We have found that several of the burial sites had many of the skeletons along with them. For example, in this photographs here, we see that 2 skeletons are kept alongside, and in this particular one, we have several of them kept along. So it is probable that in those times, the family used to bury the dead in the same pit, maybe days later or months later, whenever they found anyone going to the heavens. There was a special case, there was a special burial at Inamgaon, as we have discussed earlier. Now let's see that thing in a little detail. The historians have found in Inamgaon, nearby the river Ghod, that's a famous river there, river Ghod, which is a tributary of river Bhima. This particular site could have been occupied between 3600 years to 2700 years ago. The historians have found that the adults were buried straight in these particular lines in the burial sites, and with a particular tinge that their heads were always northward. That is, the person who was laying in the burial site, the head was always pointing towards the north. That's pointing towards the north. Here we have the east, and then here we have west and south. This could be the probable position that the historians have found. That hence we can always recognize that those people did know at least a little about astronomy. They did consider about the directions or sun or maybe moon or kind of stuff. Also, at some times the burials were within the houses. Well, this seems a little strange. They had vessels with food and water being buried. You might have also heard that in the pyramids of Egypt, such kind of things were also there. They used to bury the food, the water, certain kind of animals, equipments, or all that kind of stuff with a regular human being requires in their regular life. One of the burial sites in Anamgaon have been found with a large clay jar. He was buried in a large clay jar, kind of a coffin, and it was actually in a 5-room house, which was actually the largest house in the whole of village, and it also had a granary. The skeleton was found with cross-leg position, so we do not know whether why the legs were crossed. Maybe some kind of ritual those people might have performed. Now let's see what skeletal studies tell us. As we are discussing about skeletons, we are discussing about the buried people. What actually all these things tell to the historian? Now let's see. If we find a skeleton in a grave, we can always see, or we can always find, if the size of the skeleton is quite small, maybe 4 feet or 3 feet, we can easily conclude that the skeleton is of a child. But is it possible to recognize, is it possible to know whether that particular skeleton is a male or a female member of the society? Well, it is quite difficult, because all the skeletons are actually similar. You can never recognize the difference. You can never know the difference by simple looking at this skeleton in easy terms. Well, few of the historians at the initial stages, before the modern techniques came, they used to say that if the skeleton was found with certain weapons or certain kind of horses or animals, then probably it could have been the male member of the society, and if the skeleton was found with the ornaments, then it could have been a woman of the society. Still, there were certain doubts, because even ornaments were worn by the male member of the society even today, and even at that time in the ancient thing. Well, as far as modern science says, the anatomy of the skeleton, the scientists say that the skeleton, the pelvic region of the bone of the skeleton, if we see actually, for the female member, the pelvis has always a greater kind of a hole inside it, and for the male member, this cavity becomes small. So this is an easily detectable thing that the historians can now understand and see, and can tell whether that was the male member or the female member of the society. Well, let's see this man here. It seems as if a sage or a rishi. He's actually Rishi Charak in India some 2000 years back. This famous man, he was a physician of his time, and he wrote a book named as Charak Samhita. This book was based on medicines, and even at present, that is in today's era, we find several good things of practical importance. But Charak at that time, the Rishi Charak at that time, said the human skeleton contains 360 bones. But is it true? As we all know that human skeleton contains only 206 bones. So was he correct in counting all those bones? Actually, we have found that Rishi Charak actually added the bones, the teeth, the joints, and the cartilage of the human skeleton, and hence he came with this particular number. So even in that case, he was right. Some 2000 years ago, at that time, the modern anatomy, the modern kind of sciences were not even developed. Well, that was the power of that great man. Well, let's see the occupations at Inamgaon. That is one of the burial sites the people have excavated. The archaeologists have found that there were seeds of wheat, barley, rice, pulses, millets, peas, and sesame. Many of those are similar to the Harappan societies too. And also we have found the animal bones with several cuts on their texture. So we can conclude that those people of those era, or especially the people of Inamgaon, might be using or might be eating animals, as these cuts do suggest. Well, we have found the skeletons of cattle, buffalo, goat, sheep, dog, horse, ass, pig, sambar, a particular kind of an animal, then spotted deer, black buck, antelope, hare, and mongoose, besides birds, crocodile, turtle, crab, and fish. Well, there are evidences that the archaeologists have found regarding bear, amla, jamun, dates, and also varieties of berries are also collected from these sites. Now let's see what happened in China. There are certain excavations have also found that in China around 3500 years ago we have found the evidences of writing, which could probably be the first evidence of writing that the historians have collected. The historians have seen there were writings, there were symbols on animal bones, and these are actually called the oracle bones. These are very famous oracle bones because they were used to predict the future. Yes, seems quite interesting and strange. The kings of those time, of the Chinese kings, used to get scribes and they were asked to write question on the bones, and questions like whether they will win the battles, whether they'll have fortune, whether they'll have good harvest, whether they will have sons or daughters, or certain kind of questions which they might have been bothered about. So the scribes used to take the bones, used to write those questions, and then put those bones into the fire, and then that fire used to crack these particular bones. The fortune tellers studied these cracks and tried to predict the future. They might have been expert in that particular reading of those cracks, I don't know, and no one knows whether they were actually the right things or whether they made mistakes. Well, those kings lived in palaces, they had a huge amount of wealth, they included large and elaborately decorated bronze vessels, though we have never found any iron kind of a stuff there. Well, let's see what oracle bones were made up of. They were actually made up of the animal bones, especially that we see of turtle and the ox. Now let's see, this is the diagram of or rather the bone skeleton structure of the turtle. Here there we see the lower part or the chest of the turtle, that the lower part which actually touches the ground is called as plastron. This plastron, and it's a thick material, a bone kind of material. So these scribes used to take the plastron, they used to kill the turtles, take the plastron out, write all those questions, as we see that there are certain symbols being written here in Chinese. They used to write all these questions and then put them into the fire pits called as the oracle fire pits. Well, and then there was another animal called as the ox, and they used to take the shoulder bone of the ox called as scapulae, that's this part of the particular ox, and hence the similar kind of stuff was also done on those bones, and then the fortune tellers used to do their own tricks. Well, these are the things that the historians have found, the archaeologists have found, and they actually help us in knowing the history. Well, I hope I was able to make you things understand. Take care, have a good day ahead.